Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Steve the Book Guy, and I'm finally getting around to making another YouTube. Welcome to the Book Cave, as it were. I'm a whatnot bookseller. I do live auctions and stuff on that platform, but wanted to take a lot of the stuff that we talk about on those live shows and kind of disseminate it to everyone because we get to talking about some really neat stuff, and I get lots of good questions and people kind of know me as the book guy. So I have 5 things today that I want to kind of not necessarily disprove, but maybe give some larger insight on. Sorry if there was double audio for a second. It's my first time doing something like this live. I actually am kind of organized, and I'm going to try not to rush through it. I'm going to try to give everything the due diligence it deserves, but I can get a little worked up. But again, 5 things that I think everybody should know about books and book collecting, whether they're, I guess, like trying to ascertain the value in their own collection or a collection that they inherited or something like that. Or if you're, out and about, you're a collector yourself, and you're looking through the shelves. Maybe you don't find something for you. You find something you could trade for something that you like. The most important thing is that these books don't hit the trash. And so it's important that we kind of know what we're looking for if we are bent in that way. So I want to talk about 5 different things that I've learned as a book dude that does book things literally all day. So the first one is if it's old, it's collectible. Well, unfortunately, look at this. We're in Inception here. The what you're looking at here is a book that I've recently sold. It's called William Control. It's by William Control, The Revelator. I didn't look too much into it, but it's a dark gothic erotica fiction, and it was low print and signed. If you flip open the pages here, you can see it's pretty obvious what's going on. So when I looked it up, I saw comparative listings that were quite high. This is a contemporary book. Okay. So my first point is thinking if it's an old, it must be collectible. I don't want to discount that new books can also be collectible. So as you're looking through books, all because something is new doesn't mean it's not collectible. Now, the inverse is also true. I recently picked up a very large math book collection, and there were some collectible math books. I mean, there's collectible books in every genre, but most of the books were just, $2, $3, $4, something like that. Still, we're saving, and I'm glad they're saved, and we're finding them new homes. But even though it's old, it doesn't mean that it's valuable. For example, we also have, and we're going to talk a lot about The Hobbit in this show. There are older copies of The Hobbit that aren't really all that expensive. It was, the first ones are, and they get pretty pricey, but it just really, really depends on the actual book. Most of the books that I sell here that are old, unfortunately, are $2 or $3, and a lot of times it ends up being sold as decor or something else like that. So now, age matters insofar as what it specifically is, but age of itself is not. Because remember, there was things back in the day that people didn't like either, right? Like we have books now that aren't worth anything. Those books don't magically gain value as they get older. It's a supply and demand thing. Does that make sense? So the first thing again was age. Age is not an indicator of value, right? It can be new or old, and it can be worthless or extremely valuable. It just really depends on the context of what that specific item is. So bear that in mind as you're looking through stuff or you're making your bids on things like that. So the next one, this one's a fun one to debunk, is that hardcovers are worth more. That is not always the case. As we go on to, I'm going to show you 2 paperbacks right off the back here. This is Neuromancer by William Gibson. It is insanely expensive. This is the book. Oh, this one's signed. That might be also why it's so expensive. But this is what kind of birthed the cyberpunk genre, and everybody who is a sci-fi person wants a copy of this book. So it's a paperback. Now, again, to say that on average, the materials that go into a hardcover, so like, I guess there's an argument that can be made that like if you have 2 books that are the same, the hardcover will generally be more, but that's also not necessarily true. Because sometimes things are released as a paperback first and then they get turned into a hardback. So again, it really, really, really does matter on the context of the actual book themselves. So, but I want to show you this one as well. This is Rage by Stephen King. He was writing under the pseudonym as Richard Bachman because his publisher at the time wouldn't let him release more books under Stephen King's names. He felt it would dilute his brand. But Rage here, the story behind this was about school violence before like it was normalized as it kind of is now. And there was a school incident. I want to be careful because I don't know what YouTube allows or doesn't allow. But there was an incident, and the copy of this book was found on the suspect in question. And when Stephen King found out, he, through his own volition, pulled the book off the shelf. Consequently, it's made the book extremely, extremely rare. And this is the paperback. I think that's the either National Library or American Library or the Signet logo. I always get him confused. But again, a Signet. Very, 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 very expensive paperback. And these are sold listings I'm showing you. These are books that have actually, money is exchange hands. Because remember, you can list anything for any price, but it's only, value is, you really learn more about when the actual transaction happens, auction records, things like that. So that's what we're looking at now. The next thing that I want to talk about is, if I recognize the name, it must be collectible. So first, let me qualify with this. I think all books should be saved, and I think every book has got a person that wants it. So the real question becomes is how many people want it, and how much are they willing, to part with their value to get the book in question. So I actually wanted to show you one book that is a pop culture one. And let me say this, if you do recognize, if you're out and about and you see an older book or a really nicely put together book, high quality materials, things like that, it is worth double checking. I mean, this one isn't totally not true. Like, for example, I found a first edition Color Purple by Alice Walker the other day. I did not know that was a book first, and had I not recognized the name from the movie that Whoopi Goldberg was in, I may not have gone down the rabbit trail about learning what that book is. So first, let me say, or if you see it, again, we're going to talk a lot about The Hobbit here in just a second, but if you see a Tolkien book, Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, all that, and it's especially if it's a nicer binding or it looks old, it is worth double checking. So don't let me tell you that this isn't necessarily a myth. I think the myth is where it comes at is that if I recognize it, it must be collectible. But again, we run into how many books have been printed, what is the book specifically, how old is it, what was it, what does it mean in the context of who this person was or what this pop culture reference might be. I'll give you an example. And this is why I went to my face. This is a very, 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 very expensive coffee table book. Now, I sell coffee table books all the time. A lot of them, when I pick them up from a home, I take them all. I never leave anything behind. A lot of them get moved on for about $2-3. People flip through them a couple of times. Looks that why they call them coffee table books, because they sit on a coffee table and people like to flip through them. It's like YouTube before YouTube. But sometimes when they're made of really nice materials, and this is Jimmy Page, right, of Led Zeppelin fame. This particular book is a low print full of photos, and it's a contemporary book. I've seen listings around $250. I'm selling it for $125, $150. And I wanted to show you that they can be valuable, and it is worth checking. That was the point of me showing this. And especially if it's something like Led Zeppelin or a really, really, really specific thing that has a large following, it's worth looking up in that case. But I just want to temper expectations because it's a pop culture reference. It's pop culture for a reason. And there's going to be a lot of material as well that it, was mass produced and all of that kind of stuff. So again, it really comes down to context in the specific book in question. So doesn't necessarily mean it's worth a lot, but it is, again, worth checking. Always check. That's what I do. I sit and I check everything, and then you just kind of learn as you go. And so this number 4 is, if I have an old book, it must be a first edition. And unfortunately, that is just not true. It could be, and it is worth checking, but there's a lot of editions of books. Books have been printed many, 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 many times. Like, some people don't know that Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, right? All those many years ago. I think I'm remembering that, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong. But that book is old, like old, like hundreds of years old. Like, you probably don't have a first edition, right? You might have a really old copy. And then people don't realize that even in the 1800s and early 1900s, where most of the books that I find are from, they had like book edition copies even back then. So it's a cool edition. I'm not saying it's not worth anything, but it may not be a first edition. So what's on the screen here right now is a nerd site called First Edition Points. I'm not affiliated or anything with them. And what they've done is they've kind of gone through and they show you exactly what a first edition might be on the specific book that it is. You know, what we're looking at here is The Hobbit. Very beautiful cover. This is the 1937. That's what the dust jacket's supposed to look like. That's what the copyright's supposed to look like. Everything's very specific. If one thing is off, it's not the first edition. It could be a second printing, third printing, or excuse me, I misspoke. It could still be a first edition, but it could also be a later printing. Because, like, for example, Harry Potter, like, it's still a first edition Harry Potter if it's 50th print, but it's a later print. So there's huge print runs. So again, supply and demand, it isn't as expensive. But if you get a true first edition, first print, depending on which Harry Potter it is, it would also have to be from the United Kingdom. Well, actually, they'd all have to be from the United Kingdom to be true first, right? Because then you also have American editions and U.S. editions. So it can get in the weeds really fast. And sometimes you really just got to look this stuff up. And this is a great site. I do use this all the time. It goes through a bunch of classics. Oops, sorry, that's not showing super well on my screen here. Let me move that over just a bit. Like Babbitt by Lewis Sinclair. Here's Gatsby. Like, here's what the first edition looks like. Very, very good resource. I use it all of the time. And I want to be clear. Even if your book isn't the first edition, it doesn't mean that someone wants it. You should save it as well. But sometimes the difference between a first edition, like this one here, or this is even a second printing. This isn't even a true first. So when you think of editions and prints, kind of think of it like comic books, right? Like, sometimes you can have a first print comic book that's worth $1 bajillion, but then that second print, third print, because there's so many more printed and it's not as cool as the first print, people want it less. So from a price standpoint, from a collectability standpoint, it really, really, really does matter. And there's things called gutter codes. I know a lot of Anne Rice and stuff, like, you have to be worried about that. There's a lot to it. So again, I have an old book and it must be a first edition, and that is it doesn't have to be a first edition. So it is worth checking. We do a lot of consulting. If you are struggling to identify which book you have, send me a photo. I just need the front, back, spine, and maybe the title page. And that'll be enough to get me going. If I need additional information, like there's a gutter code or something to that effect, or if there's like a misprint on page 347, which indicates that that's an earlier printing than the copies that have the corrected print, which indicates that they caught it, and in later printings they fixed it, which is an older anyway. It could go on and on and on, but that's number 4. The last one is only certain genres of books are worth saving. I'm going to approach this from the aspect of, again, first, all books are worth saving. Even if they're not worth anything, saving a stack of kid books and getting it to a place that may not have as good access to books is an important thing. Like, you never know what book, what story is going to change someone's life. And we have to keep our eye on the prize and the main thing, especially with everything that's going on in politics and whatnot. It is important that we keep the book coming in and out, and everybody should have access to all the books. So save as many as you can and try to get them read as much as you can. So let me start with that. But also let me say that it's also true from a collectability standpoint as well. In every genre of books, whether it be cookbooks, children's books, horror books, and I'm speaking to you, all my whatnot friends. You guys, I can't keep horror in stock over there. You guys just eat it all up. But every genre has something that's going to be worth a lot. Like cookbooks, the Julia Child books are very collectible, and there's a whole there's a lot to it. Kid books are the same way. I have vintage books on my shelf right now for sale that are, 50, 60, 80, $100. The Snow White one over there is especially. You've got to come to my shows. We show all this stuff there. But so if you find yourself with a collection that you need to move on or something like that, just be aware that it may not look like you have anything, but you may, and you may not. It might be worth checking, because again, even contemporary books can have value depending on what they are. And a lot of books get signed. I mean, sometimes you got to flip through the books. It's a lot. So, and that's what we do. And that's the video, guys. That's what I wanted to talk about. Is just some kind of things that really, I guess this was geared towards folks that find themselves with a collection that they're trying to figure out what to do with, whether you inherited it because someone passed away, or you found it in a storage locker, or you're a clean out person, whatever the case may be. We do the shows, and we're trying to get YouTube started, but we also do book consulting. We'll help you clean it out. We'll go pick up all the boxes for you. And a lot of times, that's what we'll take as payment to clean it out. If you have a larger collection, it's nicer collection, and you want to discuss consignment, or if you feel that it needs to be sold, we can have that conversation. Really, whatever you need. My ultimate goal is to survive. So you need to leave some meat on the bone. I just want to get the books. I want to look at all the cool stuff and take the dopamine hits and all that stuff. So, I appreciate you watching this. I hope you got some value. I will get better at this over time. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm just kind of finding my groove. So I appreciate it. And if you need any help with anything book related, I'm Steve the Book Guy. So, and I'm in the book cave. I think I am going to keep calling it the book cave. Maybe I'll start all these things with, "Hi, I'm Steve the Book Guy. Welcome to the book cave," or something ridiculous.